You're watching BBC News. As protests over the death of George Floyd continue in the US, demonstrations have taken place in cities all over Europe in a show of support and solidarity. In London, thousands of marchers gathered for a protest organised by campaign group Black Lives Matter. Well, let's speak to Benjamin Zephaniah, who is a poet, a writer, a musician, and who uses his work to educate people about politics and racism. He joins us live. Benjamin, thank you so much for your time. When it comes to what happened to George Floyd, it's incredibly close to you and your family.
That's right. In 2003, my cousin Mikey Powell died in the city of Birmingham here in England in almost an identical way. He was on the floor inside a police vehicle, and a police officer's foot was at his neck. And so when I see this footage, it wasn't kind of theoretical for me. It was really guttural. I really felt the pain of that person, George Floyd.
That was in 2003. It's 2020. It's still happening. Why are we still here?
Well, it's interesting. I've just been watching your news programme, and every time I heard the word police, it said police force, police force. And I thought, we are paying for these. This should be a police service. Why do they feel they have to come with force all the time? And that's how we in the black community feel. But when they come into our communities, it's a force. And it's interesting, I've seen footage of when, not very often, but when the police officers have actually been quite civil with demonstrators. And in one case, actually walked with them. And they were welcomed. You know, but when they come with armory, when they come with a kind of attitude which is very forceful, people react. I was a young person on the streets once, and, you know, I've talked about this in books of mine and in the media before. I've reacted. I've been in what they call a so-called riot. We call it uprising, because we feel it's not just what happened to George, you know. It's years and years of pent-up frustration. And it's interesting, I've been watching demonstrations all over the world today. Australia, New Zealand, even in war-torn Syria, in Iraq, people saying Black Lives Matter. And most of them, although they are making solidarity with George Floyd, they're also talking about their own black communities as well. We're just very tired of this.
Benjamin, how do we change this?
Well, I think it's very difficult to talk about this without being ultra-political, but when you have a president and when you have rulers of countries that don't acknowledge the racism in their own countries, it's very, very difficult. One ray of hope is the people on the streets are black, white, Asian, they come from all kinds of backgrounds, and a lot of them are young people. That's a sign of hope. But there's a lot of, dare I say, old people with old attitudes who have power that refuse to change, refuse to acknowledge that the world is changing. We express our multiculturalism through music and poetry and our arts and just the way we live and the people we fall in love with. Why can't they recognise that the world is changing and change their so-called forces accordingly?
Are we still struggling when it comes to talking about race? Will a white person ever understand what is happening to a black person?
I've never been a woman, but I understand. I saw my mother being beaten by my father. I've worked with women who have suffered domestic violence. I will never feel the same pain as them, but I can show solidarity with them. So, you know, we don't expect white people to turn black or anything like that, you know, but at least they can acknowledge what's happening to us. And I can understand that some white people, and to be frank, there are some black people as well who live in areas where they don't really see racism in the way that we see it in the inner cities. But they shouldn't deny that it exists. And that's what can be frustrating sometimes. Sometimes, again, sorry for making the analogy, it's a bit like a woman who suffered domestic violence. You know, one of the first things that happens is that people deny that it happened to her, or they don't take it seriously. Well, we feel the same, that sometimes we complain about our racism, but people don't take it seriously enough. One thing we keep hearing all the time is that we've got a chip on our shoulder. Well, I don't have a chip on my shoulder. I have injustice on my back and justice on my mind.
Benjamin, I wish we had more time. For the time being, thank you so much for those words. Benjamin Zephaniah, thank you for your time.